So step number one, when it comes to drawing a portrait, is that we want to draw a circle. Now, if you will, you can use a compass tool to get a perfect circle, but you can also draw the circle manually. And it's important to understand that the circle does not have to be perfect so long as its height is relative to its width. And then step number two, we want to place our side oval. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're cutting off the side of the circle to elongate the cranium. And then once we have that placed, we then want to draw in our vertical axis and then our horizontal axis. Now, the reason why we want to draw these two lines is to allow us to start to understand the orientation of the head in space. Okay. And then we're going to extend our hairline over from the top of the oval. We're going to extend the horizontal axis over for our brow line. And then we're going to extend the bottom of the oval over for the bottom of our nose. Then once we have those lines placed, we're going to draw our center line of the face. And then we're going to draw down our vertical axis and then pull that over and connect it to the center line of the face. And then we're going to extend that line up over on the far side. Okay. And then we're going to draw in our anchor points for the top of the upper lip and then the bottom of the lower lip. And then we're going to draw in our cheek plane. Once we have the cheek plane placed, we're then going to draw in the neck and the shoulders here, just so we don't have a floating head in space. And then you can go ahead and hit your Loomis head with a kneaded eraser so that it's more or less transparent on the paper. And then that way we can see that framework and we can use that to our benefit as we draw. Now, what I like to do is I like to start sketching out the outer edge of the subject's ear. The ear will always be placed in the bottom rear quadrant of the side oval. And when I say rear, of course, I mean rear to the front of the face. And one of the reasons why we want to start with the ear is because we can then use the ear as a basis for the rest of the features to come, right? We can use it to gauge our proportion because that is the challenge when it comes to drawing any portrait. So once we have the outer edge established, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to sketch in the basic features of the inside of the ear. And now we're going to start with the hair. So the subject's hair is wet and it is pulled back. So I'm just going to start sketching this in real light, just like this. I like to draw from the sideburns up, and then I go to the hairline of my underlying Loomis head, and then I pull that over, right? Once I have that drawn, I can then use the Loomis head as my gauge for how high or short the subject's hair needs to be. So in this case, it's because it's wet, it's weighed down. And so I'm just going to keep that nice and low, just like this. And I'm going to extend this off the back. And I'm just using real light pulls here. I'm not using a hard pressure control at all. And it's good, especially for these initial lines that you're drawing in, to use a lighter pressure control. Say, for example, if you're using a charcoal pencil or a graphite pencil, so that you can erase and make adjustments as need be. Now, for that far side of the face, this is where we start to carve out and solidify the actual face of our subject, okay? Because remember, the Loomis head is great, but it's more or less just a mannequin, and that's all it's ever going to be. It is up to you as the artist to go in just like this and start to carve out exactly where the edges of your subject's face live, okay? All right, so now we're going to switch from the Loomis method to the Asaro method. First plane is what is known as the nose bridge plane. So we're going to draw a horizontal line just like this. And we're going to pull these two vertical lines up and then slightly away from each other. Notice how the eyebrows of the subject plug in to the tops of those vertical lines, right? Everything ties together with the Asaro method. And the more you draw with it, the more you'll start to understand that fact. But just like this, I'm focusing on the basic two-dimensional shape of my eyebrows here. That's all I'm doing. I am not worried about detail. We are focused solely on the proportion of our features relative to the head. And now that I have those eyebrows placed, I'm going to draw in my frame lines on this far side. It's hard to see them from here, but the frame lines extend down and give you an idea of where your top eyelid resides. So we connect those. And we can also bring out the fold of the upper eyelid and then the bottom of the eye. And then here's frame line number 1. And then we also have the temple plane. I don't really like that, so I'm just going to redraw it. But the temple plane extends down and it plugs into the second frame line. And then we have our third frame line off the side here that goes into the corner of the eyebrow. I'm then going to connect all 3 of those frame lines. Here's the corner of my eye, and then I'm going to bring that line back and connect it just like this, right? And then of course her top eyelid folds in, so I want to bring that fold out in the drawing. ABC, 1, 2, 3. It's that simple. And while we're here, I'm just going to place her iris, and then she's got a little light reflection too, so why not? Okay, so that's pretty much the short and the sweet of how you would draw the eyes. And then here, for the nose, we're just going to start from the bottom, and we're going to work our way up on this far side because we are dealing with a 3/4 turn angle. And then we have that bottom plane. Now, when it comes to these planes, guys, lean heavily into the Asaro head model. It's there for a reason. You can use that to help you identify where these planes need to be within your reference. But then this plane here, I have my bottom plane established. This is the nose ridge plane, and then I have my nostril, and I have that nose tip. This plane right here on the side is what is known as the slope plane. So you have the nose bridge between the eyes, the nose ridge on top of the nose, the slope planes off the side of the nose, and the bottom plane for where the nostrils reside. And that's pretty much it for the nose. And then we're going to extend these 2 lines down. This brings out the philtrum, right? The philtrum plugs into what is known as the Cupid's bow, which is the top center of the upper lip. We have the corner of the mouth here and here. You can extend this line from the Cupid's bow to the corner or from the corner to the Cupid's bow. It really doesn't matter. It is truly personal preference. And then here, I'm just going to bring out this line, and this will more or less give me the upper lip. And then her mouth is slightly ajar, so we're just going to draw it in this line, and then we're going to bring these lines up and over, and this brings out the bottom lip for us. And now right here, I'm going to bring out these Asaro planes. Now, these Asaro planes, I'm referring to the Asaro head model to bring these out, but essentially what they are is they are the basic framework that brings out the underlying form or bone structure. You can think of it that way. The Asaro plane lines give you the necessary structure for both bone structure and underlying flow. They're more or less the same thing. But yeah, we just extend these up and then all the way back to the ear, just like this. And then we have another one all the way down. Yeah, something just like that. This reference has a softer bone structure, so we can use this side of the Asaro head model to give us the soft structure that we need so that we can be as accurate to the reference as possible. Okay. We're about halfway done with this one. But then here, what I want to do is I want to start showing you how you can begin hatching your sketches. Now, I'm a big advocate for doing just basic structural sketches such as this. There's no need to work on blending and shading and all of those things if you can't get this far, right? Because this is framing your proportion. Proportion is everything in portraiture. Even with drawing animals, let's say, you can get away with your proportions being off skew just a little bit. But when it comes to a person, it's very, very hard to hide that. Okay, so if you follow these tutorials and you draw these over and over again, it is the perfect exercise for you to build the necessary muscle memory so that you can become the best artist possible. Okay, but here, when it comes to these hatch marks, there's hatching, there's cross hatching, there's all sorts of other ways to blend your sketches, but I'm keeping it very, very basic throughout these tutorials, and this one specifically, because I know that you guys want me to just go 110 miles an hour, but there's lots of us here, and there may be certain members that don't have this down, so I'm trying to keep everything as simple as possible. So when it comes to the hair, this hair texture is a little different. Most of the time, you're not going to be drawing a portrait of someone that has their hair soaked in water. But I wanted to do this one just so that you are as well versed as possible in the different textures that you come across. But the principle remains the same here, okay? Just like other portrait drawings, what we're doing is we're using single strokes, and we are bringing out what are called the different segments of hair. Now, segments are pretty much sections, right? Segments, sections, same thing. But what we want is when you bring out the different segments of hair, what you inevitably end up bringing out is the flow, okay? Kind of like how we use the Asaro planes to bring out the underlying flow and the bone structure of the subject's face, right? We're doing the exact same thing with the hair, only we're using segments and line work to bring out that flow that we see within the reference photo, okay? And then here with the eyebrow, I'm just doing single strokes. Pay attention to each individual stroke because they all mean something, right? Really have a laser focus on the direction that that hair is flowing within the eyebrow, and then just hatch your drawing accordingly. Something just like that. And the cool thing about hatching like this is that it does make your drawing just that much more dynamic, right? And the thing about it as well is because you want to draw as many of these as possible through sheer volume and sheer force of will, you will become better and better, and you'll be able to take different depths to each portrait sketch that you do. Like some of them can be super, super basic, right? Maybe you're only focusing on proportion. And then other ones you can do proportion and then you can start to hatch like we are doing here, right? The possibilities are truly endless. But kind of like how I not only filled in her eyebrows, but then I filled in her eyelashes as well. Now what we're doing is we're going through and I am just doing single hatches and I'm paying attention to the direction and the flow of each one so that I can start to provide volume to the drawing, start to bring form to her face, right? And then here for the lips, I'm just gonna punch in the Asaro planes. Now remember, the top lip is split into 2 planes by 1 line, and the bottom lip is split into 3 planes by 2 lines, okay? You don't have to add those if you don't want to, but because of the nature of this video, I'm walking you guys through every aspect of the fusion between the Loomis method and the Asaro method. There are lots of artists out there that get hung up on criticizing each method individually. I think that's silly. I think that when you look at different methods of drawing, they were developed for specific reasons. And when you look at methods, just like anything, there are good points to some and there are bad points. But what you can do is you can take the best parts of each method and you can bring them together to create something new. And essentially, that's exactly what we've done here. So, art is truly what you make it. Your art depends entirely on you. I've always liked to use the tools at hand to make my job easier, especially when it comes to starting out with things like drawing a portrait, because the beginning is always the hardest part. When you have nothing, that is when things are the toughest and the gloomiest, right? But then here what I'm doing is I'm just thickening up the line quality here on the back end of her hair. Okay, and this is one of the things that I've talked about in other tutorials, but you can vary line qualities across your drawing. So say, for example, when you look at like her eyebrows, when you look at a lot of the segments of hair that we laid down initially, those have very, very thin line qualities about them. And here I'm thickening up those line qualities. Now, a very strange thing happens in optical illusion when you start to mess with the quality of lines and you bring them together. All of a sudden, you bring out this sense of form literally with just lines. Okay? It's something that a lot of tattoo artists will mess with, especially in neo-traditional approaches, where you'll have a very, very thick line over here, but then you'll have a very thin line over there. When it comes to, like, say, American traditional in tattooing, it's kind of like that, but not so much. You have a lot more uniform line qualities throughout a design versus that massive variation that you see in a neo approach. When it comes to drawing on paper, it's very much the same thing. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I look at this drawing, now that I've gone through and I've thickened up a lot of those line qualities, while at the same time still keeping those very, very thin line qualities, the hair looks way more dynamic, and it looks a lot more realistic to the reference photo than it did before, where everything was kind of one note, right? And that is something that as you draw more and more, you will start to wrap your head around, and you'll start to use it in a lot of your own drawings. But when it comes to line qualities, there's also line weights. They're similar, but they are different. So when you have a very, very thick line quality, like what I've been laying down here, you tend to have a very dark line weight. Now, when I say line weight, I mean the opacity of the line, right? How dark it is or how light it is. So a light line weight has a lighter opacity to it. A dark weight has a heavier or darker opacity to it. So, but yeah, something just like that. Now, you can spend as much time on these as you will, but I think this is a pretty good place to wrap this one up at. If you have any other questions about drawing like this, I have a bunch of step-by-step drawing tutorials just like this of various angles and reference photos available here on YouTube. So definitely check them out. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.